All right, let's get right to the calls today. Let's go out to Tim in Tucson, Arizona. Tim, what's going on this morning? How are you?
I'm good, Dr. John. How are you?
Outstanding, brother. So what's going on? How can I help?
So in March, my nephew took his life. And,
how old was he, man?
he was 21.
Dang, I'm so sorry, Tim.
Well, I really appreciate that. And since then, my oldest daughter has really struggled with this one. They weren't necessarily close. However, it's hit her in a way that is kind of hard to describe. She's kind of opened up about it and said, I wish I could have done something. I wish I could have prevented it. And then she then has continued to say that, I'm afraid that possibly I will then take my life.
Sure.
And then, I don't know, probably maybe a month ago, she started having these night terrors. And it's been 4 or 5 nights a week where she just wakes up with these terrible dreams of, him being hurt, and she's trying to save him and she can't. And it's just been relentless.
Yikes, man.
And so we've didn't think this was going to be as challenging.
You're good, brother. It's hard, man. It's hard.
In my head, I played this conversation out multiple times, and it was way easier in my head.
Dude, so much. You should see when I try to make a jump shot. I'm always going to make it in my head until I actually let the ball go, and it never goes in, man. So I'm with you. Hey, there is something, and I appreciate you saying that out loud. There is something uniquely unique about saying something out loud, and it's hard. So I appreciate you doing that, man. That's brave, brother. Yeah. So where does that leave you guys, you and your wife? Where does that leave your family right now?
So we have, we've reached out to local counselors here.
Okay.
And either they don't take kids or they're booked out for months and months, and or they don't accept our insurance, so it's only cash pay. Yep. Which, $1
million.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not about the money. It's just about the. I just want to make sure she gets some quality service. So we actually ended up reaching out to the school, and the counselor got in contact with her, and it was great, and it was working really well. However, with summer approaching, that ends, and I'm at a point where I don't know how I can help my daughter, because she doesn't necessarily want to go to another counselor and start over, with trying to, progress. But I'm trying to see if there's any practical tools
you got it
that me and my wife can do to help her with these night terrors that she has.
Man, well, I love your heart, dude. Yes, there are, and there's also something you can do with the counseling. But so, give me one piece of information. How did she come to find out about this? What was you and your wife's grieving process like? How did your daughter find out about it? Walk me through that really quick.
So, we got the phone call. It was early in the morning. I don't know. It was probably 5:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning our time. Mm-hmm. So kids were up. We were getting, ready for the day. And so went into the room. My brother had told me, hey, he actually didn't even tell me at first that he had taken his life. He just said he had passed away. And so me and my wife were like, well, let's see what we can do, if I can fly out there, because he lives in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So that morning was a little hectic. But we didn't divulge that information onto them before going to school. We needed a moment to be able to kind of try to process what happened,
Yep.
And what our next steps were. And so we were as calm as we could be with them. The kids could tell something was off because I was in the room,
sure,
telling them, hey, stay out for the time being.
So walk me to that afternoon or that evening. How'd y'all tell them?
So I ended up flying out that afternoon. And so unfortunately my wife was kind of left with the bag of kind of explaining everything.
Okay.
said, your cousin has passed away. Dad went out there to go be with your uncle and try to, help in any way possible. And immediately my daughter went to, did he kill himself? Which right off the bat was like, holy cow, we didn't even, it was out of the blue, like how did your mind even come to that?
Sure.
And so we were like, well, we're not going to lie to you, yes, he did take his life, and she wanted to know why and how, and we were like, we don't know how or why at this point. And
does she know that stuff now?
We haven't, we didn't know.
Okay.
He shot himself. And so we don't, it's just such a,
but you haven't communicated that to her, right?
No, we have not. I
didn't ask you this. How old is she?
She's 11.
11. Okay. All right.
And so
go ahead.
We've explained, there's, the world is a hard place, and sometimes people feel that's the only way out. And in those situations, we need to look to help other people,
Yeah.
And you never know what a comment you say could either make or break someone else's day. And it's super fine line of, she's still young, but obviously, this is,
yeah.
It's just such a hard place to be in,
Yep. All right. So let's back out of here a little bit. And here's what I'm going to need you to promise me. Okay. I want you to promise me that, I'm going to promise you that I'm going to be honest as I can with you, with the best of the information I got. And I want you to promise me that you will be joyful about getting new information, and you're not going to walk back and try to recreate or redo something that you can't redo. Is that cool?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So anytime I could tell you story after story, after I was well trained to walk into these situations, I would come back and think, man, I absolutely blew that. And I'd have my partner and I would debrief when I would go into some of these situations, and we would both go in together and we would talk about, hey, you shouldn't have said that, or you got to ask this question differently. And so I want you to know, trained people still debrief and still say, man, I wish I could say this again or that again, all that. So backing all the way up, for an 11-year-old, I would err on the side of this statement. When they ask, how did it happen? Why did they do that? Saying things like, well, some people just think that's their way out. Some people just choose that that's how they're going to do this. That is a destabilizing construct for an 11-year-old, because the next question they're going to ask themselves is, well, what if I'm that kind of person? Or what if I find myself in a situation where that's the only result, the only thing I can do? So my standard answer for adults and for children is that they were not well. They were really struggling. They were sick. There was a illness in their heart and in their mind, and they came to a heartbreaking conclusion. They did something that they weren't in their right mind. And that tends to alleviate this idea that this is just going around and can happen to anybody, and more, okay, they were sick. They were struggling in that way. Also, when folks press me on details, I would often tell people, I want the last memory you have of that person to be the last time you saw them. Smiling, saying goodbye, saying I love you, saying I'll see you later. Not with whatever imaginary media-filled picture you're going to concoct in your mind of what that looks like. Because unless you've seen that scene actually with your own eyes, it's not what you think it is. And so I don't give details, especially like that, to children. I might tell them, when you get older, we can talk more in details, but I want you to remember Timmy or Billy or whatever his name is. I want you to remember them the last time we saw them. And they were laughing and smiling before they got sick. Right. And so I say things like they died by suicide, not they committed suicide. Okay. I want to norm it that way, in the same way that a kid will be terrified when somebody they know gets and dies by cancer or gets and dies by a heart attack. That's scary because their world becomes a little bit less stable, right? Oh, that just happens. People can get this thing and it ends this way. Yes. And so backing out of this, even another layer is this idea that, so let's pause here. So the conversation from this point forward is cousin died by suicide. He was sick. He was really struggling. And this is not going to happen to you.
Okay.
And you can say that with the period at the end of it. Okay. And what if I get sick? What if I get like this? We're always going to be here. So if you ever feel like that you're not doing well or you're struggling, that's why we're here. And you're going to reach out and we're going to create a space for you to reach out. You're always okay to talk to us. Right. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to connect with your daughter, not trying to solve her pain and hurt here. So then I want to back out one more circle, if you will, one more, I don't know, another 10,000 feet here, and recognize that a common response to grief, especially suicide or especially what people imagine is a violent end, is their picture of that person gets stuck on the violence, that they are still hurting, right?
Right.
And so a really remarkable exercise that you as a family could do together, you and your wife and your 11-year-old, is to write a letter to him where he is now. Right? And so if y'all are people of faith, that he's in heaven, or if you're not people of faith, that he is resting gently and he was sick and he was really struggling and now he's not hurting. Right? And we wish he was here so much. And writing him a letter and talking about where he might be puts a new picture in your daughter's head, whether that's in her imagination of what heaven's going to look like, whether he's in a field, but it begins to shift her heart and mind away from this guy's actively in gruesome pain right now to, he's not hurting anymore. We're hurting, right? And so she's not stuck on that night terror loop of, there is somebody in pain and I can do nothing about it. And my body is fighting and fleeing all at the same time. And it's waking me up and waking me up and waking me up. Does that make sense? So
that makes sense.
Gives her a new picture for what that can look like, right? And so the third thing would be being really honest with her about mommy and daddy are sad. And I want you to norm in your house what those feelings are going to be like. Give her permission to, if you will, have a release valve. So maybe do a nightly check-in, or not nightly, because not doing it around bedtime is good, but an afternoon check-in. Were you thinking about Billy today? I was. It made me sad. I miss him. How did you feel? And give her space, give her an invitation to talk. Some 11-year-olds don't verbalize that well, and so maybe drawing a picture, right? Giving her an opportunity, or y'all just color together or something, but create 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 minutes a day in the afternoon, or in the morning, where y'all can have some space together just to process out loud, and let her see you grieving, and let her get a model of what grief looks like, that it's okay. I'm not bananas. It's okay to hurt. Mommy and daddy are sad too. And then recognize her entire world has shattered in that people just die. Does that make sense? It becomes existential too. And so writing him that letter, letting her create a new picture. And by the way, in that letter, she can say, I'm really mad at you that you did this. She's allowed to say that. She can be mad at him. It can be heartbroken. It can be any number of feelings. All those feelings are okay. Getting them out on paper gets them out of your head, and you can see them, right? And that comes back to one last important thing that I want to pass along. Man, you mentioned that some people just make this decision. I want you to be really cautious about giving her weight. You never know if you just say the right thing or the wrong thing. For an 11-year-old, every decision just became life or death. Every conversation.
Yeah.
And so I don't want an 11-year-old walking around bearing the weight of, if I don't say this thing right to whoever, they may die. Does that make sense?
That does. And
I get where your heart was awesome. Your heart, because here's my other thing. I tell my son all the time, you have the opportunity to shine a light into somebody's day every time you interact with them. That is a different weight than you. at any moment you could say the wrong thing and they're going to die, right?
They're just gonna, yep.
So I would shift that conversation and maybe even say, hey, I said this the wrong way. You are not going to ever be responsible for somebody taking their life, 11-year-old child. You're not. You don't have that kind of power, right? If somebody chooses to take their life, they've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on. If somebody else dies by suicide, there's so much other things happening there. But what you can do is you can make somebody feel loved. You can shine a light in somebody's soul. And so we in our house, we're going to be about making sure that the waitress knows that we value her, that the guy at Burger King, we love them, that knucklehead who keeps driving too slow in front of us, that we're going to, we're not going to yell at them and model for our kids that we can't control our temper. That is a different way to shift that conversation than tagging your kid with that. Does that make sense?
It does. And
Awesome.
and that's, it has definitely, that conversation has shifted in that direction.
Awesome.
100%.
That's good. So one last, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say, one last thing I would shift to you is this about your teacher. Ask your school counselor for a referral in the city. Have you already done that?
We have.
Okay.
And we don't live in Tucson. We're like 2 hours south. So we're in a smaller community.
Okay.
And they're just, there is not any options here. It would have to be going up to Tucson to try to find someone.
Okay.
And she did not know of anyone there.
So let's do this. We can have some fun. You can turn it into a fun conversation or a thing you're going to do as a family. But I want you to go to betterhelp.com/Ramsey. And if you can't get in person, they do have online counseling. They have a special deal that they worked out for listeners of this show. And it's betterhelp.com/Delony and DELONY. And they'll give you a discount and on the first month of counseling there. But you and her, y'all could talk to a therapist. You can put it up on your TV screen at home so she can watch it and be interacting with it. And you can get some more practical tools and tips there. But my gut tells me that you guys sit down and have these conversations with her, write him a letter, have her imagine where he is now, that he's not actively hurting anymore. Have a nighttime routine. Talk about this in the daytime, not right before bed, so that's the last thing she's thinking about. Begin to, and then most importantly, model for her what grieving looks like, what healthy grieving looks like. And of course, if these night terrors continue, if she starts getting more anxious, you see weight gain or weight loss, you see her beginning to become a shell of herself. 100% reach out, do what you got to do. You can do half-day intensives. There's all kinds of different programs. If you got to drive to a new city, start with betterhelp.com. But make sure you are reaching out, and a high five to you guys for reaching out to your school counselor. That's fantastic. But try those things and then give me a shout back. Let me know how those things go. And I'm really grateful that you are trying to do right by your daughter, and don't neglect your own grief here. You lost your nephew, and that's heartbreaking.